welcome everyone. Welcome to a new edition of Remixing Politics and Culture with me, your host, Pam. I'm so glad that you have decided to stop by and be with my guest and I as we talk about this earthquake decision that's happened in our country. I certainly appreciate all of you who are going to sign in, and I want you to like and thumbs up the video no matter where it is that you're seeing it, and to please share it with your friends and family. All right, so a little bit about me. I am a public relations and marketing professional with a passion for social justice, voter advocacy, and culture. And tonight we're going to discuss the Dobbs decision, which, of course, came to the U.S. Supreme Court, of course, from Mississippi, right? A good old southern state. About half of the United States now have banned abortion care or have taken steps to limit access to abortion care since the earthquake Dobbs decision has been made. The top court in our nation effectively overturned a 50-year constitutional right that women have had in the United States. There was no stare decisis, and I only learned that term when the Senate hearings of the last few Supreme Court justices were being vetted through the Senate hearings, that process. And they said, oh, if a law has been on the books for so long and it is the law of the land, we believe in stare decisis. We will not touch it. We won't bother it, et cetera, et cetera. Of course, as you know, 1 year ago, as of June 24th, I believe, they lied. We found that out effectively, that they lied. So we're going to discuss all of this and so much more with tonight's guests and you, the audience. Okay, so coming up first, I have Miss Narissa Smith. And Narissa is a lawyer, speaker, teacher, and journalist. For over a decade, Narissa has worked as a law professor teaching criminal law, U.S. constitutional law, and classes such as critical race theory. As a result, Narissa understands the many ways the American legal system perpetuates racism, sexism, and other forms of inequality. Welcome back to the show, Narissa.
Hello. It's always great to be here. I think this might be my third or fourth time. I'm not sure, but I'm happy to be here.
Absolutely. And next we have Mary Rarick. Mary, this is her first time appearing on the show, and hopefully, certainly not her last. She is known professionally as a caffeine-addicted super connector, a communications consultant. Mary says she leveraged her guilt and rage hangover from 2016 to step out of her introverted shell and become a grassroots political activist. She is a producer and host of You Can't Beat Blue and a volunteer for Run for Something. Mary is a resident of Portland, Oregon, with her husband and their rescue cats, Paul Newman and Perry Mason. Welcome to the show, Mary.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yes, I'm so excited to have someone from Portland, Oregon. Narissa just wiped out on me for a minute. Something happened with her internet, I think. So we're going to keep going. So, Mary, anyways, I was starting with you. Being that you live in Portland, Oregon, you have no worries regarding the impact of the Dobbs decision on you all there in Portland, Oregon. But yet you're politically active, fighting for the rights of those negatively impacted. Tell us why.
I'll tell you, it's because as a white woman with gray hair, I think it's important for me to step up and speak up for people in our community and the country, for that matter, who aren't able to do the same. Mm-hmm. important to me to basically use my privilege, because I can knock on doors with a lot less fear. Although I am an introvert, I can knock on doors with a lot less fear. And also, if 2016 taught me anything, it's that, I've got to do something.
Very good. Very good. Narissa, as an attorney and a teacher of constitutional law, what did you think? What came in your mind when you first heard or first learned about the Dobbs decision?
This is gonna sound, I want to phrase this very carefully, but I want to say I was not shocked because it had been in the works for a long time. And those of us who follow the court, and especially constitutional law, we were just kind of taking bets facetiously, but kind of, gallows humor, right? To say, okay, what's going to fall first? Is it going to be voting rights, affirmative action, or abortion? And so it's like, okay, well, it just kind of depends on what's going to get to the court first. And it just so happened that Dobbs was the case that presented the first opportunity to attack reproductive rights. Affirmative action is coming. It might be this week. And then I can come on the show in 2 weeks and talk about that. But a lot of bad things are happening. And I know this is just my introduction, so I'm not going to get heavily into it, but I will say this, and it is going to sound like I am just beating the same drum, beating a dead horse. Forgive me, PETA, but we have got to vote, because the one thing, if people who are listening get nothing out of what I'm saying, what happened in Dobbs and where we are now would not have happened without the 2016 election. And that's right. Yes, the system is flawed. And yes, the Electoral College is 9 different kinds of messed up. But knowing what we know now, we need to know that we cannot take an election for granted, because elections, unfortunately, they are impacting people's lives. And we can do something very small to stop this, which is voting.
Right. And the reason why I even started this show was because of voting. We have to learn it, like voter education is so key. And people think, oh, we know how to vote. We know how to do. No, you don't. No, you don't. And listen, Mary, both Narissa and I met here in North Carolina, right? We're both in the same town. We're in Durham, North Carolina. However, we're both from the great state of Michigan, which Michigan has done some great things, okay? Okay, we've got a great governor and everything here. But here in North Carolina, we've got to show voter ID this time around when we come to vote. It's like ridiculous. But anyways, that's something we got to get going. We've got people already chiming in on the chat. Let me Greg Dotson. Greg, I know your name. I know we must be friends on Facebook. It says, question to each guest. Please, I'd love to hear them respond. What standard do you use to measure, determine truth? Well, you know what, Greg? That sounds kind of round the curve and through the woods, and I don't know how that fits in with our topic right now, but we may get back to you, okay?
But I can say one thing about that. When I was a law professor and doing my academic sort of writing, one of the things I wrote about was the First Amendment. And I got to say, one of the things that we're seeing play out in real time, I think it's a valid question, because part of our politics and our problem right now is that you have 2 Americas, not just race or class. You have people operating from 2 different points of view because they have different facts. So if you have on one side people who think that abortion means that a doctor is going to go in and take a fetus that is like 41 weeks and drill a hole into its skull and kill it, and some people actually do believe that, right? And that's what's happening, or that, folks on the left want to put an abortion clinic on every corner or something like that. That's ridiculous. And part of what we have to do to fight back against this, I'm going to be speaking with this reproductive rights organization next month, and I'll put it to the Black Women Politics group, Pam, is about the messages we're getting about abortion, because that's part of the problem. It's a big part, and partly I do blame the media for how the issue was covered, but and if I'm getting too far afield, please feel free to stop me. But I also, and we can't ignore, and I want to get into this later, the rise of the white evangelical right and their hijacking of the GOP and how that impacts this. Can't ignore that. But the other thing is that one of the things that I found when I was teaching is that people just don't know how our system of government works, and they don't know basic things. And people also don't know human anatomy. There was this thing that Jimmy Kimmel did, which was both funny and sad, where he had men, and their partners, their female partners were next to them, and he was asking them, like, okay, identify the fallopian tube, identify the ovary, identify like these parts of female anatomy. It was like right after Dobbs. And his head writer for his show is his wife. And I can always tell when she comes up with the skits, I was like, I know that she came up with this one. And these men could not do it. And so I think that truth and facts do matter. And one of the things that we're going to have to do if we want to reclaim our country is make sure that people are operating from the same base of fact, because Fox News has done one hell of a job of making sure that people are miseducated, undereducated, and they're walking around thinking they know things, but they don't, because they're being fed bad information. And I will stop now talking for too long.
Mary, what would you say about misinformation or disinformation that has just permeated the minds? It's almost like a cult type of situation that's going on. I don't even know how to I don't know how to explain it. I don't know. What would you say about that?
Well, it's so important, as you're saying, and what Ms. Smith was saying about Fox News is also important, because a whole lot of people get their news there. And I think I'm a Democrat, and as a Democrat, often we say, oh, the Democrats need to do this and they need to do that. Well, guess what? It's up to us. I feel like we are the ones who are responsible. We're the ones who are in charge of our own messaging. And what you're doing here, Pam, with this broadcast, this is a service, because you are broadcasting truth and you're cutting through the noise. And this is exactly the kind of thing that we all need to be doing.
Amen. I agree completely. And we've got to do more things like this. And one of the things that political science research has shown is that it's hard to change someone's mind. Like there are very few like political commercials or things like that change, but conversations like this or talking to people about these things, they can have an impact, and getting people to see that, okay, I know that's what you thought, but that's not how that works, right? Of course, there's some people, who are not going to change, but we should not be wasting our time with them. We need to be looking for people who are persuadable, number one, kind of on the edge and not persuadable, but also all of the people who are out here who, don't vote, to me, is the bigger problem. They've tapped out, especially, I would say, especially in the Black community, the Latino community, poor white folks, like they know that they're impacted by this, but they bought into the narrative that why should I vote? Because nothing I do is ever going to really change anything. And I think if we're talking about fact and truth, that's one of the things that we really got to hit hard is to say, actually, no.
Tamara Wells put out here, are we heading into the dark ages where women, white, brown, yellow, can't even vote? Mary, answer that question for Tamara. What do you think?
I feel like that the court has already told us that they want to lean towards taking more rights away. I mean, with this decision that was made last year, this is the first time, and I'm no legal expert, but this is the first time that I can remember that they've taken away some freedom from people. And I know it feels like we're losing, but actually, I'm an optimist and I know we're winning because people only cheat when they're losing. Winners don't have to cheat, and they are cheating, and they are trying to change the rules. And there are people, you know, we've got pay to play justices right now.
That's right.
That's terrifying. And they don't want people to vote. They want us to be scared because when we're scared, we don't act. But you know what? There are more of us than them. And you're exactly right, Miss Smith. If we can get people out there and remind them that we have the power, and the only way things have ever changed in this country is when we've stood up and demanded it. And we go to the polls, we win.
That's right. Yeah. When we show up, we win. That's a fact. That is an undeniable fact that when we show up to the polls and vote, we have to vote overwhelmingly. We have to have everybody come out and vote and vote righteously. And what I mean is vote in your best interest. So many people in rural America vote against themselves.
And white folks in particular, am I right?
Exactly. Because, but you know what the beautiful thing that's happened here, Mary, in North Carolina? We have a young woman, all of 25 years of age. She is from rural North Carolina, and she's a spitfire. Her name is Anderson, and she's been on Good Morning America, and I've been trying to get her on this show, and I'm determined to get her on here because she gets it. And she says, I know I'm going to mobilize these people, and she is doing it. She's the youngest party leader in a state, I think, ever. Yeah, she's only 25, right, Narissa?
I want to say, because I've seen a few of the stories about her. And if I may, just really quickly, I was taking down a few notes, and I'm going to go really quick. About what you were saying about Anderson, like look at what Stacey Abrams did in Georgia. People thought that Georgia was like this deep red state, but no, Stacey, my Spelman sister, went through and she mobilized the folks, and she figured out how to do that. And one of the things that I was hoping was that people would find different ways to replicate that. Yes. And I haven't seen that writ large, but you know, as Mary was saying, that we have to find ways to do this ourselves, and that is something that has always happened. Ironically enough, is that you know the things that have happened that have caused this country to change, they haven't come from party leaders or other things. They have come from people doing things and taking action. Like for instance, I love when I teach my Black history courses, I love teaching about Rosa Parks. But what I always tell the kids, and sometimes the adults, is that it wasn't like Rosa Parks just woke up that day. That's sort of like a myth that we've been told. She went to the Highlander Freedom School in Tennessee. She was taking classes about, you know, civil rights and civil disobedience and all of these things. And a lot of the people, including Dr. King, John Lewis, they also did that. We have to be willing to use whatever tools we can, whether it's TikTok, whether it's a YouTube show, whatever we have and whatever gifts we have to use them in service of trying to restore some kind of sanity to this democracy. And another thing, to go back to the question that was asked about, are we getting to the point where they don't want women to vote? I'm going to say that specific right hasn't been on the table, but a few months ago, not long after Dobbs, there was this white conservative man who wrote this essay for like the New Republic, or like one of those, you know, neocon type of things. And he said, you know, if we're going to be conservatives, we got to go all the way with this. You know, why are we stopping, you know, with abortion? Like, we got to go for birth control. And why not divorce? And the thing that I have heard gaining the most traction is that in these Republican controlled states, they want to change divorce laws. And you might think, oh, well, that's not such a big deal. That's a huge deal. But a lot of people who don't know, that most people who went to law school know, is that divorce used to be a huge burden. You used to have to, if you want to get divorced, you had to do what they called a prove fault, right? You had to prove that you were being abused, which that almost never worked for the women. Every once in a while it would. You were abandoned somehow. He was going to be in jail for more than 3 years. And I'm saying he because it usually wasn't women. Or that there was infidelity, right? And a lot of times, just as kind of a funny thing, if two people were married and they couldn't stand each other, sometimes what they would do is they would stage an affair and like come in and take pictures and be like, I caught him cheating, therefore that would be the fault because they couldn't stand each other, but they, they didn't have grounds for divorce. But California, I want to say, it was in the 60s. California said, we're going to introduce no fault divorce, where you can split, you could just say irreconcilable differences. Anything else, we just don't want to be married anymore. And that ushered in a new era because women were like, oh, really? And when you couple that change with the change coming with women, also the birth control pill was introduced in 1960. So Roe gets decided in 1973. So by 1975, you have women who can go to college and get their degrees because they have birth control that will allow them to stay the whole 4 years without having to worry about, okay, am I going to get pregnant? Am I going to have to drop out? And they have now, because they have degrees, they have access to jobs and they can delay marriage. Now,
and they have agency over themselves. And that's what they're trying to do. Is that I guess they want us to be Stepford wives or something utterly ridiculous in this 21st century. It's insane. Latrice says it's no coincidence that Republicans have targeted school boards.
That's right.
That's a whole nother subject. And we've had this conversation on this show. And they want to control the curriculum. Right. So if you're dumb and you don't know reproductive health, if you don't know these things of how to take care of yourself, you don't know history, just basic history, you're destined to repeat it. You are absolutely destined to repeat it.
I want to go back to this. It ties into this and something else that we just said. Did either of you see this documentary on Amazon called Shiny Happy People?
Oh, boy. I saw the first episode of that. And by the way, I grew up in the Midwest and my past is not far from that at all. In fact, I've attended the Bill Gothard seminar.
No.
Oh, yes. That's a whole nother episode altogether. But so I definitely understand a lot about this keeping women down because that is exactly where I came from. Exactly.
Really? For the folks who don't know,
we're in the Midwest, Mary.
Illinois.
Oh, okay. Oh, listen. You were adjacent to Narissa and I in Michigan.
Exactly. And before that, Iowa.
Okay.
And the reason why I brought that up, for those who didn't see it, Shiny Happy People is a documentary, and it starts out about the Duggar family that you might know from like 19 Kids and Counting and all of that. But what makes this fascinating, because a lot of the stuff about the Duggars, if you watch some of the YouTube videos, that they've been dissected a lot. But what these documentarians did, they used the Duggars as a platform to do a deep dive into the IBLP, which is ran by a man named Bill Gothard. And the thing that chilled me to my bones is I think it's the third or fourth episode of the Shiny Happy People documentary, which I recommend everyone should watch. They talk about the politics of this organization, and it ties right into what we're talking about today, because in this cult, because I refuse to call it a church, that they were operating, women are not just encouraged, but required to have as many children as the Lord will allow. So that means that if you belong to this cult, you can't use birth control. at all. That is a sin against the Lord. Abortion is an extreme no. And that's actually how Jim Bob Duggar introduced himself into politics. Was like, well, I went to this Right to Life march, and I was like, God put a calling on him. I'm not even going to talk about that guy because he's a huge hypocrite. But the other piece of it is that they talk about the politics that they wanted to go. They said they wanted to take over the country to make it a Christian nation and mold it into what they want. Now, let me tell you all, before you dismiss it, like, well, how could these,
I'm not dismissing it at all. It sounds Christian nationalism. I'm not dismissing it at all. It's Christian nationalism.
It is.
One of the young men who was interviewed in the documentary, he's not a part of it anymore. He clerked for Justice Anthony Kennedy. So he got to that high, into the Supreme Court. Our friend, Madison Cawthorn, he was part and trained of this group. And there are more and more of them out there. And what they're doing is it's a very manipulative sort of thing, because they're like, yeah, I'm for God, faith, and freedom, and so when you hear that talking again about messaging, how could you be against that? But when you pull back the curtain and you look behind what these people believe, it's insane. Also, you can't get divorced in this cult, even if you are being abused. I tell you, my jaw dropped when this woman said that there was a contract between her and her husband about the domestic discipline that was allowed, whether he could hit her. This is insane. That's the life that these people want us to lead. And how does this tie into Dobbs? Well, a few years before Dobbs, but when RBG was still alive, right? There was this Hobby Lobby case. And the founder of Hobby Lobby was a best friend with Bill Gothard and helped to fund a lot of their institutes. And what that Hobby Lobby case did, it was sort of chipping away at what happened. It said, okay, well, we're going to say that employers and people, they have a right, if they want to not provide birth control to their employees. And so you see how we cannot untie all of that to say, and again, please watch the documentary Shiny Happy People. It's on Amazon Prime. But you really have to know that what we're up against, because we have to be just as tenacious as those folks. They waited 50 years to kill Roe. That was not an accident. And, when there were Republicans and the Supreme Court, took a little bit longer, they didn't say, oh, I'm not going to vote anymore. I'm not going to vote Republican. They stayed the course, right? There's a shirt I saw a few years ago that I really liked, and it said, vote like a Black woman. And I was like, okay, that's a great sentiment. But now the more I think about it, I want to tell people, vote like a white man, because what they understand is that they have something to lose, and they're going to vote. They don't care. A lot of them tell you they hate Donald Trump. But they didn't care because they knew he was going to appoint the Supreme Court justices that were going to do the things that he wanted them to do. We have to vote like that and remove the emotion from it and be very strategic. I don't care if Joe Biden is in a wheelchair in November 2024. We cannot let Trump, DeSantis, any of them. No, we can't. We have to say that we will not let them further drag us back into the 18th century. Because that's what they want. And I've been talking way too long. I'm going to shut up.
Okay. So listen, Mary and Narissa, I'm going to put up on the screen the states that have issued bans on abortion since the Dobbs decision, the earthquake decision, and highlight those who are adding punishments and vigilante justice on those who perform abortion care and those who receive it. And we're going to discuss that a little bit, because I had the hardest time, and a lot of it too is probably because I was too last minute, trying to get a physician or someone in the medical field to come on the show to talk about this thing. And so let me try to share this screen. Okay. You see it?
It's
Yes.
coming. It's
Do
a
you,
little hard to read.
oh,
Let's see.
do you see where it says at the top context?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so I'm going to scroll down to the area I want to see. Okay, so here's a list of states introducing bans and curbs. An asterisk denotes the 13 states that have passed so-called trigger bans
Mm-hmm.
prior to the ruling, which were designed to take effect automatically if Roe
Mm-hmm.
fail. They were planning it. I tell you one
Yes.
thing about these Republicans, they have a plan
Yes, they do.
at all times. So
Mhm.
Alabama, the Human Life Protection Act, which compares abortion to historical genocides. That was passed in 2019, but only came into force after the Dobbs decision. Anyone convicted of performing an abortion faces up to life in prison. There are no exceptions for rape or incest in Alabama. Arizona, abortion is banned beyond 15 weeks. The Arizona Court of Appeals has said a 19th century law banning all abortion will not be repealed, but doctors cannot be prosecuted under it. So it's like you have to really pick your state. If your state has banned it, where you're going to be able to go, if you can go, or whatever. Arkansas. So
But
they
that's
have.
the problem, isn't it? Is that especially, let's just go back and talk about this because Dobbs was going to always, and we now know has had the biggest impact on women of color because
That's right.
when you are like a wealthy white person, I saw somebody in the chat talking about, Mark Robinson, our lieutenant governor here, who is just a whole piece of work.
That's
But
the whole.
yeah, he and his wife, he said, well, yeah, we had an abortion. These folks will have one rule for thee, but not for me. They
That's
have
Yeah.
right.
no shame in being hypocrites because
That's
also
right.
with the way that they believe, well, I prayed to God for forgiveness, and that's
Right.
all that matters.
Right.
They will
Right.
be very quick to do that, even if
Right.
what they do behind closed doors does not align with what they say in public. Look at what Josh Duggar was arrested for and why he's in prison for all these years now, just to have
Right.
an idea of this. But
Right.
look at, could you pull the map down, please, Pam? And you see, like, no, I'm sorry, pull it up so we can see like where the South is
Okay.
here.
I was going to
Look
say, hold on. I want to say Arkansas, they have the trigger ban. Anyone who performs an abortion faces up to 10 years in prison, a fine up to $100,000 or both. There are no exceptions for rape or incest. So what I wanted to get into, let me go back to my notes on that, was that my concern was, how is that constitutional when you have no exceptions for rape or incest? And then by the time we go through all the 50 million court cases, as we all know that a person is pregnant, and could possibly even be able to use the drug to have abortion, self-abortion care. We're in a mess.
Yeah. And just to go back to answer, how's it constitutional? Well, we got to go back to how we got here, which was in 1973, the Supreme Court said, well, I got to step back a little bit further. There's different kinds of rights that are embodied in the Constitution. So you have the rights of the states and those sort of structural things, like what the states have the right to regulate and all of those things. But then you have what we call individual rights, like free speech and, the right not to have the police come into your house without a warrant, all those individual rights. Most of the first 10 of the Bill of Rights are individual rights. But if you look at, there's nothing in the Constitution that says anything specifically about abortion, reproductive rights, or anything like that. Before Roe, there actually were two cases, Eisenstadt and Griswold, that said, actually, yeah, people have a right to their own reproductive, because there were laws in Connecticut that said you either had to be married to use birth control and all these things. It had to be prescribed for a doctor to get a condom. Like, it was ridiculous. So the Supreme Court said no. And what they did, they said, we take the 9th Amendment, which gives some reserved rights to the people, and we look at all these other things about privacy that are, the police can't come into your house and all these things. Well, we read into that a right to privacy and bodily autonomy. You can do with your body what you want. So that's in like 1965, right? 66. So in 1973, the Supreme Court gets into this, and they said, well, you know what? We think that this right to bodily autonomy extends to a woman's right to be able to say that she does or does not want to have a baby. Now, Roe had a trimester framework, and they said, okay, first trimester, you can't have any limits on abortion. Second trimester, a little bit different. Third trimester, the state can come in. Then we got to fast forward a little bit. All the right-wing folks are mad. They're attacking. But then we get to this case called Casey, and this came out of Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania had a lot of laws. A woman had to get her husband's permission before getting an abortion. Minors had to get their parents' permission, even if they were victims of incest. So you had to ask your abuser for your right.
Yep.
And Sandra Day O'Connor, who was the only woman on the court at that time, she and Justice Kennedy and Justice Souter, they wrote, this almost never happens with the court. They jointly authored an opinion that said, here's what we're going to do. We understand people are upset about this. First of all, this whole thing about women having to ask their husbands, nah, that's out. Minors, yes, states can require that they have parental permission as long as they also give them a judicial bypass. They can go in front of a judge, ask the judge for permission, right? But here's where things get interesting. It turns on viability, right? Viability says, well, when can the fetus live outside the mom, right? Or the birthing person. So when can the fetus live outside the uterus? So when the fetus comes to viability, which is usually about 24 weeks now with medical advances, really like 26 weeks, right? Still very premature, but can live. So Casey said, after viability, states go ahead, make any kind of regulations. You can outright ban it, whatever. Before viability, you can't make any sort of limits that put an undue burden on a woman's right. So after Casey, that happened in 1992. Oh, they kept chipping away and passing all those laws you were just talking about, Ms. Pam. And then what happened? How do we get to this in Dobbs? In Dobbs, they went all the way back and they said, you know how we said in Roe that there's a fundamental right to control what happens in your body, and there's a fundamental right to say that you can control your body and decide whether or not you want to carry pregnancy to term? Psych, we lied. We were wrong, and we're reversing that. And we're going to leave this up to the states. So the reason why that's constitutional is because under the 10th Amendment, when they leave things up to the states can make whatever kind of rules they want to. Now, the thing that complicates matters is what's interesting, even in some of these states that had these really horrible trigger laws, like even in South Carolina, which is like super crimson red, their Supreme Court was like, nah, this is going too far. You can't do this. That goes against our own state constitution. In Oklahoma, there were 5 conservative women that said, nah, we're not gonna, stand for this. So there are still ways that people have been protecting the rights even after that. And I know, and I'm sorry I've been long-winded, but that's the shortest answer I could give on what happened now and how these laws are constitutional, because the Supreme Court said we leave it up to the states. And in those states, these people who were in control passed those laws. And the Supreme Court said, hey, that's A-okay for the state to control it, which is, again, why we need a strong federal government and a strong centralized system of rights. Because the other thing is that we see people talking about small government, No. We need rights that apply to all 50 states, because the rights that you have should not depend, especially something as important as bodily autonomy, on what state you live in. And I promise you, just to finish this, the next thing that they are attacking, and I'm not making this up, there's something called the Interstate Commerce Clause and Interstate Commerce. And one of the things also in the Constitution that they found is a fundamental right to travel and to cross state lines. And medical care has long been accepted as one of the reasons why, and states can't turn people away. Now the conservatives want the Supreme Court to go back and challenge that and say, no, you should not be able to cross the borders. So not only do they want this in their state, they don't want you to travel to another state.
I had that in the sharing, and I'll have to put it back up to show that you were talking, so I didn't want to go through all of those, but there were a few states that are going to prohibit travel. So they're going to block you coming and going with this thing about your right to choose and what have you. So Mary, I have the do I need to put up the US again with all of the states and the color codes again?
No, that's okay.
Okay, so look at those states and all of our country color coded like it is in a manner. It's really like a manner of the haves and the have-nots.
It really is.
You know,
it really is.
Like who has it and who doesn't. What are some of the ways that you think that we could help us even the score?
Oh boy, how much time do you have? Well, I mean, if we all know what happens, I mean, some of us are quite triggered when you talk about states' rights, right? And when things are decided by states, anybody who knows history, which is of course why they don't want anyone knowing about history.
Right.
Okay. Right. And then also, if you think about if they can criminalize this, all of a sudden a woman's got a record. All of a sudden, I think drawing it out and showing people this also affects your voting rights potentially in some states. This can affect a doctor. I mean, there's so many things. I think we have to have these discussions with our friends and our family. We can't be afraid to talk about these topics anymore. I think it just starts at that grassroots level. I mean, here in Oregon, we are doing things, the state legislature is doing things. We've got Planned Parenthood that is like building a new facility on the edge of Idaho to help, right? But those are things that, you know, you and I, we don't have control over that, but we do have control. I think it's so important just to remind people, we can talk about what are the effects of this. Learning how to talk about it is just huge. But if you can, to finish my point, if you can criminalize someone for having bodily autonomy, for taking care of herself. This is a decision, by the way, that women don't just say, oh, yes, I'm going to go and get this procedure. They're not excited about it.
No.
Often these are planned pregnancies where something has gone horribly wrong and they have had to communicate with their doctor and talk about it and make very, very difficult decisions. Just even talking to my dermatologist, this is a small story, talking to my dermatologist last year, it was right after this happened. And she said, are you still doing what you do? And I said, I am. I was really surprised she knew that I was, you know, a grassroots organizer, but she's like, I remember you. And we were talking about this and she said, 2. She said, I've had to have 2 abortions because of ectopic pregnancies. She said, I wouldn't be alive today if I lived in a state like that. So normalizing it with those circumstances, because we all know someone who has needed to have this kind of health care. A lot of people don't choose to have it themselves, and that's okay. But we also are compassionate enough people that we know that even though we might not choose to have something ourselves, or we don't think we would unless we're in that situation, right? Because you never know. Right. But we would never take it upon ourselves to say, oh, you shouldn't have that either. The country was built on freedom. So I think learning to talk about it in that compassionate way, I don't know if that answered your question, but that's how I like to think about it.
And you know, you gave me, you brought me up to another question for you, in that I thought that was interesting that you said that Planned Parenthood is literally building another facility close to the border of Idaho. So that, because of course, if you recall on our sharing the screen, Idaho was one of those states that has the ban. So you're trying to make it easier for them to be able to come, instead of traveling so far to get help.
Yes, because think about it. Physicians are leaving states like Idaho, Montana.
Yes.
They've put up, I don't know which one of them, but I know one of them has put up legislation to prevent people from traveling, right? To criminalize that.
It's on that screen. I'll go back to it.
It's serious. And so, and when you think about it, I mean, I just saw these statistics, 64% of OBGYNs say that maternity mortality has worsened this last year. 64% of OBGYNs say that. 70% say it's worsened with racial inequalities in access to medicine. That's 70% say that. And that's a Kaiser Family Foundation study. And I was just like blown away, because we know, and that's something, especially as white people, we don't talk about, we don't even really know about it. It's one of those things that we take for granted because of the bubble of privilege that we live in. Even me, I live in a metropolitan area. We have lots of access. Rural Oregonians, not as much. And by the way, the state is very purple. It feels blue, and it always kind of comes across as blue, but we very nearly had a horrific governor last year. And it was just, thank goodness abortion was on the ballot, right? All over the country, because with abortion on the ballot, because Americans are in favor of having the right to choose.
Right. That's right. Before coming here, my eldest daughter is a geography professor, among other things, and she specializes in Black towns. And she told me some rather interesting history about Oregon.
Oh boy. It was founded as a white
racist state. Yes, I
did not know that when I moved here. Did not know that.
She told me that Black people weren't allowed to move there, and it was founded in the 1800s. So it was kind of founded later than most of our states. And she said and then she talked about the militia. And she said that rural Oregon is what you said, which makes it which you in your area, the metropolitan area is very blue, and rural areas are very red. And and it's no different here than that sounds like North Carolina too, because North Carolina, Narissa and I live in a very blue city. Very blue,
navy blue,
right? Duke is our
of course
university here, along with UNC is in Chapel Hill down the road. So it's all this blue, and then we've got North Carolina Central Maroon and all that. I didn't want to leave them out, but so and then when you get into rural areas,
right,
we go up the road to Roxborough, whatever, it might get a little bit and yet what we have to learn as Democrats, and that's something that Anderson is going to do, I know she's going to do it with our help, is that she is going to get people to stop voting against themselves, stop this, myopic point of view. I'm going to vote Republican, but what are they doing? And how is it impacting you? Because here's the real big thing that drives me bananas about this whole abortion thing. How many, when during the pandemic, 10 million children were lifted out of poverty due to the child care bill, right?
That's right.
Now, if we have lots more children born for whatever reason, whatever the situation is, our government doesn't want to do right by child care laws, for child care for the parents and all of that. It is next to impossible to make a living wage with the rate of how insurances and healthcare and rental to rent and to pay for childcare. Parents just don't have it. And it's really, we don't have a family-friendly, family-centric policies in place so that we can have children comfortably in this country. We just don't do it. And yet you're going to act like we're in the Handmaid's Tale. I've never seen that show. You know, Alicia Baker Rogers put it, this was the Handmaid's Tale era. You know, I can't even imagine. This is nuts. Absolutely nuts.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right. But the other piece of it is that when you're talking about folks voting against their rights, or voting against their interests, rather, especially when we're talking about white voters, one thing that we really need to start attacking and interrogate, I don't mean like attacking, but like really interrogating, is what their interests are and how we can change those interests. And what I mean, and folks who are far smarter than me have done a lot more writing on this, is that white resentment is a huge thing.
Yep.
There are a lot of young white folks, in particular, those who don't have college degrees, who are angry because they feel like the American dream has passed them by. And the crazy thing is, they're not wrong about that. But what they're wrong about, and what Fox News glommed onto, is filling in the why. Well, we could tell them that the reason why you're struggling, you know, Joe and Jane, rural white person, is because during the Reagan and Bush era, right, corporations were deregulated. They were allowed to move overseas. All of these corporations that have been providing good paying manufacturing jobs were taken overseas, all of those things, and that there's corporate systems in place that want to depress your wages, all of that. That is all accurate and true, which goes back to the first question about truth. But what Fox is telling them is, you know what? You don't have a job because those Latinos, they got caravans of folks coming over here trying to take your job.
Right.
They want your job, right? You know, and look at these black people over here. You better get a gun. You better get a few, because these black people want nothing more than to come into your house and, you know, kill your puppies and rape your wife and kill everybody. Like, it's constant fear mongering.
Yes.
And one of the things about talking about white folks and their voting interest is trying to be respectful of the fact that, yes, these folks are hurting economically, and they're not being given the American dream that they were promised and told that, you know, they could participate in like everybody else. But the other part of it is taking the time to explain to them the truth of the why, and say, no, it's not these Latino folks who are coming here to work for pennies. They're not taking your jobs. What's affecting you is corporate policies. And there's a lot of that's been written that since, oh gosh, basically since Reconstruction, ever since Black folks were freed, there have been people in high positions that have worked hard to antagonize Black folks and working class whites, because they know that the day that working class whites wake up and say, "Ooh, you know what? This is really not good. These corporate people are not, you know, caring about me," that's going to be game over for them. And they really don't want that to happen. So finding new ways to talk to people and approach people and explain, like, hey, you know, I feel that you're hurting. I understand, you know, why you're angry. People told you go to school, work hard, you can get a job, support your family, but you got to work 2 or 3 jobs, especially if you don't have a college degree. We got to find ways
nowadays, because you got the student loans they have to pay back.
Yeah, exactly.
Interest, I just, it's insane. Mary, how would you suggest talking to Caucasian people? How would you suggest those conversations be had? I think certainly I love having this conversation because I think it's important. It's very important.
I think I've got 2 things that I'm thinking about. I think it's important to point out that, well, one, as a white woman, I need to convince other white women that their proximity to power is not power. They think that it will protect them. If they learned nothing else from Dobbs, if they learned nothing else, that should have been a big old wake-up call, because we always thought it was other people. Other folks were going to have to deal with stuff. We thought we were going to, hello. I mean, that was a big old rattling of the cage. So that. Another thing that I've learned, I'm going to say three things. Another thing I've learned is that if white women, who tend to be more activists than white men often, if we can talk to those white men, because the white men are a huge part of the problem, white women are a huge part of the problem too. But if we can talk to them and help move them along, that's going to be a huge thing. And the third thing I'll say is this. My good friend Fennell Norton, a little over a year ago, said to me, I need you to get on TikTok. And I said, no, you don't need one more middle-aged white woman spouting off about stuff. My role in life is to uplift Black women, because we should be paying attention. Y'all have been right. We've been way hella wrong for a long time. And she said, no, here's why I need you to be there. Because people won't always listen to someone who looks like me. She's a Black woman, I should say. People won't always listen. Other white women may not listen to her. And she said that, and I thought to myself, if I tell myself that I want to uplift smart Black women, why am I not listening to the smart Black woman who's telling me what I should do? So I said, okay, I will give you 100 TikToks and we'll see how it goes. And I have to say that the impact that I see there, I see minds being changed. I see a shift in movement. I see white women saying, what should we be doing? How can we be doing things? I see that happening there in a way that I don't see on the other social channels. And I've been on other social channels for a long time. So, even from my own little apartment, I'm able to have an impact there, not just with the everyday people that I see, although I think that's that's the most important thing. Just one TikTok a day. It's something.
I've got to use my TikTok. I just haven't used it. And I got to chop up my videos that I do here on YouTube and elsewhere to get them out. And for that young man who promised me he was going to help chop up my videos and get my voice, audio and stuff on
Where is he?
Where are you? Where are you, young man? Where are you? I hope you hear this.
Even just going on, I'd be happy to do a tutorial on how to easily do it, because let me tell you, my first TikTok was a word I can't even tell you about right now. It was not pretty at all. I wanted to say all these things, but it kept cutting me off after 15 seconds. And I thought, I am not going to let my perfectionist tendencies also think about that. That's patriarchal. That's right wing. That's all that. They want you being perfect so you don't do things, right? And I'm like, I'm not letting that get in the way. I'm going to hit play. I'm just going to hit push play and just get stuff out there. And now I've got it down to a science. Every 2 weeks, I draft TikToks and I just put them out once a day. So it's doable.
We're going to talk some more, Mary. We're going to talk
okay.
some of that stuff, because I thank you for responding to me.
You're welcome.
I don't remember what page I was on. I was just I was putting out a SOS call that I wanted people to come on my show and what have you. And one of my pet peeves is when you promise me you're coming and you don't show up. That is a no. I had a state representative do that to me. And that's a big no. Because later on he says, oh, well, I can come on again. Well, I'm just going to wait before I invite you, because it's just disrespectful. I know I'm not Joy Reid or anything like that, but I do things in order. I try to be on time. I try to do things decent and in order. And all I ask is that you respect me too. That's all. Yeah.
I know. I happened to see things. Shonda Rhimes wrote a book called Year of Yes.
Yes.
Oh, and so every so often I pick that up and I practice that. And so when I saw your ask, I thought, oh, but that would be scary. And I don't know anything about it. And I don't even know if she'd want me and all this other stuff. And I'm like, you know what? Just be brave. Just offer. Just say yes. And that way she will have me to rely on if she can't get somebody else, And I think it's important, like just in general, this topic and other things, we just need to say yes. We just need to step out of our comfort zone. I mean, I have to step out of my little introverted self and go do things, because guess what? Our freedom depends on it.
It literally and figuratively does. And that's the only reason why I started this show, because I'm not, trust me, I'm a Virgo, so I am a perfectionist. Okay. I mean, but I really got out of my way, because when I started this thing, I didn't have all of the bells and whistles or whatever. And like I said, I do still intend to have my audio on traditional podcasts.
Wow.
And so I purchased the package to do that, but the person that I was talking to that was going to help me do all of that, they haven't come through. So it's so discouraging. And just to get people to do what they say they're going to do, my God,
Preaching to the choir, my friend. Preaching to the choir.
Yeah. Oh, and that is, I'm sorry.
Deb Reynolds Carter says, how best are we going to hold our legislators responsible for protecting women against rape, since they feel like that's not a reason to have an abortion? Some of
Miss Smith's getting ready.
Hey, Narissa, go.
Whew, okay. In addition to constitutional law, I also taught criminal law and gender law. So this is something that I feel very strongly about. And this goes back to, again, I'm going to go as fast as possible because I know that our time is limited, but this is a fabulous question. To understand how American law processes rape, you have to go all the way back to the English common law and understand how they approach things. There couldn't be a rape if the woman didn't cry out, if she didn't fight back. All of those things in American law really took that ball and ran with it. And it was only, believe it or not, in 1984, when I think everybody on this panel was alive in 1984. That was when New York became the last state to say that marital rape was an actual crime.
That's right.
Think about that. Think about that. So once you were married, what the law said was when you got married to a man, you consented to sex with him at any time and in any fashion. But luckily, in the 80s, thanks to a lot of activist women and a lot of work that was done on both rape and domestic violence, we started to see a change in the laws, especially by the 90s. So by the time I started law school and finished law school, like in the 2000s or whatever, there were laws that said, okay, you can't bring up a rape victim's sexual history. That was a huge thing they used to like to do. Okay, you're a prostitute. So how many sexual partners have you had? If you're a prostitute, can you really be like, they would do all of that.
Yep, I remember that.
The good news is most states now have laws that have modernized their rape laws. And it's not just, it used to be that rape had to be a penis inserted into a vagina. We now understand that there's a lot of other forms of sexual activity. They have been reworded to also account for, same-sex content, all of these different things, right? So that's the good part. The bad part is that our legal system has not yet caught up with where we are in society. Rape victims still don't get the support that they need. That is a horrific thing. All you got to do is Google rape kit backlogs. You'll see exactly what I'm talking about. Prosecutors will tell you. I was sitting in a thing once when I was a law professor, and this woman just said straight out, she was a prosecutor. She said, prosecutors hate rape cases. They're exceptionally hard to prosecute because usually there's only two people in the room, and it's a hard deal. So I got to say, Deb, that I thank you so much for that question, because what Dobbs highlights is that women aren't just fragile in their right. And I should also say women and other femme presenting people are not just fragile in the way that controlling the right to bring forth a child. We're vulnerable economically. The wage gap is still very much a real thing. And when you bring race into it, I want to say Latinas only earn like 54 cents for every dollar a white man earns. We should be ashamed of that. But people very rarely talk about that. We're vulnerable, as Pam said earlier, because we don't have child care systems and maternity and paternity leave policies in place. We're vulnerable because domestic violence, similar to rape, there's been a lot of great progress, but still, when you get into the policing and prosecuting of things, there's still a lot of hoops to jump through. So I just want to say that to say we should let Dobbs be that wake-up call, that alarm. People were hitting the snooze button. Oh, they're never going to get rid of Roe. And, like I said, patting themselves on the back and, doing all of these things. No, this is the alarm and the wake-up call to remember that all of our rights are only as good as the people who are there to enforce them, whether it's the police officer that's at the scene of a domestic violence incident or a sexual assault, whether it's the prosecutor who gets the case, whether it's the judge who is hearing the case. Some judges have said some horrific things in some rape cases, whether it's a Supreme Court that decides what a person can do with his or her body in reproductive health. We have got to understand that none of it is permanent. It's only as good as the people that we vote in to protect it. And one more time, I told you I was going to be a dead horse. If Hillary Clinton had won in 2016, then Justice Ginsburg wouldn't have died on the bench. First of all, she would have retired immediately.
She would have retired. That was her plan. She was to stay on and then swear in Hillary. That was the plan. That was the plan.
It's a dumb plan.
We can litigate that one all day. I'm not going to say that is wrong, but also that whole mess that they played with Merrick Garland. We got to take that into account too.
Yes, they stole that from President Obama.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there was a lot of foolishness going on. But again, if Hillary Clinton had been elected, she could have pushed through that Merrick Garland appointment or whoever else she wanted, if she wanted somebody else. And the point is, we would not have a Supreme Court that has 6 conservatives, 3 of whom appointed by an orange fool.
Yes.
And one of whom is probably a rapist, but we're not even going to, one of them is a sexual harasser and one of them is a rapist. So
Right. I wonder how Miss Christine Ford is doing now.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
Remember? She had to go and she was harassed so much.
And Anita Hill. Oh my gosh. She changed my life. She changed my life. I had the honor of speaking with Dolly Lithwick, and she said she knows her personally. And I said, you have to tell her my story. I actually spoke up about my sexual abuse because of her courage. When I saw her on TV, I thought her speaking out so courageously gave me the courage. And so Anita Hill is my, she changed everything.
But this goes back to what Deb was saying too. Like, remember how, like, I know all of us were like alive, and I wasn't an adult then, but I was a teenager, old enough to appreciate what I was seeing, back in 91 when all of that happened. And remember how she was vilified, excoriated, all of these things. Because,
and he had the nerve to say he felt he was having a high-tech lynching. Don't you remember that?
But Black conservatives always want to invoke that imagery when they're feeling victimized. But when you want to look at something that is a real life problem for people of color, then racism isn't real. Until it happens to them, then all of a sudden it's real.
Right. That's when he claims it. And we've got a problem here, Mary. We've got this Mark Robinson. Oh my God.
What's that about?
He's our lieutenant governor. He's a Black man. He's the one who's admitted that he and his wife had Deb brought it up. Deb Reynolds Carter brought it up. He
had an abortion.
Yes.
But he does
awful. He's homophobic. He's the worst.
He's so homophobic, and the things he says is just beyond the pale. He is horrible.
He's a Republican?
Yes, he's running for governor. And
oh boy.
Get Josh Stein who is our current attorney general. We have got to get him there. And hopefully Josh Stein will come on my show soon. I hope so.
Oh, that would be so awesome. And just because you mentioned Josh Stein, again, how voting, I told y'all, got to beat that dead horse.
No,
Josh Stein is an amazing guy. He's one of the few politicians who I stay on his listserv after the election because he sends you things. Josh Stein, now here in North Carolina, for those of you who are in other states, North Carolina is a very purple state, but we had this horrible woman from Charlotte flip from her party affiliation.
Right.
Yes. And so now the Republicans have veto-proof super majority, right? So they passed
that should be illegal.
It really should. But
and 2 of them in Louisiana, right?
Law. I'm sorry?
Yeah. Weren't there 2 in Louisiana too who flipped this spring?
I think so. Yeah, and it's
like a strategy. It's a strategy.
Yeah. And she ran at the Democrat years before.
Yeah. And she ran on a pro-choice platform, which is the crazy part. But she voted for this anti-abortion bill that just passed because she said, well, I thought it was a nice compromise. No, it's not. It bans abortion at 12 weeks. But the reason why people are upset is because it also affects the clinics. Basically, they have to have like hospital type settings, which they're not equipped for. So it's being litigated now. But Josh Stein sent out a thing. He was like, if they want to defend it, they can. My office won't be defending it because I'm not. So again, voting at every level matters so much. If we didn't have Josh Stein, if we had like one of those Republican AGs, like the one in Texas who doesn't want trans kids to have, care and all of that stuff, we would be just in even a worse position than what we are. I know I'm from Michigan, but I've lived in North Carolina now officially longer than anywhere else in my adult life. I love this state, and it's just been so sad to see these Republicans just they smell blood in the water once she had that party thing, and they've been doing the worst, most awful things, and it's only going to get worse. And we have to vote like our lives and our freedoms depend on it,
because they do. Our lives really do depend on it. Listen, guys, we're over by 11 minutes, but I knew we would be. I knew. Because that's just how we roll when we get going on a conversation. We have an active chat. I want to thank Narissa and Mary. I thank you guys so much for coming on. I have enjoyed this conversation. I thank my listening audience. You guys, please thumbs up the video no matter where you're listening, and please share it. Please share it, because that's the whole premise behind this programming that I'm trying to do. And also, if you're on YouTube, please thumbs up the video and subscribe to my channel. You can hit the alarm bell to know whenever we're going live, or if I decide to upload a video or whatever I do. Who knows what might happen, right? Okay, so we're going to say goodnight to everybody. Let's wave them off. Good night, everyone. See you next time.